The Gil and Lila Silverman Fluxus Collection arrived at the Museum of Modern Art in 2008. In the years following its arrival, multiple generations of teams have been involved in the Herculean task of researching and cataloging the works and documents contained within it. The artworks in the collection were placed in the Department of Drawings and Prints, given the department's historical and sustained engagement with editions and multiples, and some materials are housed in MoMA's Archives Department. Now, more than 10 years later, the processing of the collection is still ongoing. One reason for this is the collection's extraordinary size, containing well over 10,000 objects and documents. Though unwieldy, it is an indispensable repository for study and research. Beyond its scale, another key challenge posed by the collection is the way these works actively push back against categorization and elude the strictures of the museum's protocols and standardized approaches to understanding and making legible the works in its collection. When I began studying, researching, and cataloging this collection in 2017, this aspect of the work was both immediately apparent and genuinely thrilling. No sooner than we had tried to stretch and adapt the guidelines, another work, another question, would emerge to make obsolete the revisions we had just made. Originality, authenticity, authorship, fixity, materiality, medium specificity, they all come under rigorous questioning through this collection. The works put pressure on all of the institutional logics that we have come to call conventions, and revealed them clearly as they are, as assumptions about what art is, about the information that we privilege about it and its making, the ways those assumptions shape our readings and understandings and our stewardship of the object. It is clear that the perceived neutrality of these cataloging activities is in fact a fiction. As a result, this work provides an opportunity to think more expansively about this institutional process of interpretation and translation and how it can rise to meet the nuance demanded by these works. Even at the most basic and fundamental level, do we yet have a satisfying solution to navigate showing works that are meant to be handled, touched, and played? Wrestling with these works, attending to the radical challenges they pose and the frictions they produce, is tremendously generative. As much as we are accustomed to thinking through these questions in art history and conservation, particularly with regards to contemporary art, it is revealing how much space remains for revisiting and reimagining our approaches, particularly from within the museum context. As often as we made adjustments and exceptions to cataloging rules, the ultimate goal of the museum is to try to make Fluxus fit within the institutional cataloging rules instead of pursuing the much more radical proposition of allowing these works to transform our approaches, our thinking, and the institution. It feels urgent to have spaces where archivists, conservators, scholars, and curators come together and interrogate these assumptions and discuss how we might draw from these conversations new vocabularies and practices that faithfully respond to the transformations demanded in this process. We hope to participate and contribute to this process by sharing our experiences and approaches and some reflections on their limitations through some recent projects in the hopes that this can foster collaborative and interdisciplinary conversations and bring institutional transparency to the thinking and activity around this collection within MoMA. In this brief presentation, we will present case studies on works that involve audio recordings in relation to questions of performance, works involving CRT monitors, and 16mm film, to reflect on the ways we have addressed the complexities that arise from engaging with these works.
Media conservation's initial engagement with the Silverman Fluxus Collection followed a more traditional role of risk assessment and rote preservation planning on a material level. We inventoried the media elements in the collection and prioritized them by their need of stabilization, treatment, and/or migration. We focused on the over 300 time-based media items in the collection, ranging from open-reel audio to analog video in various forms of 16mm film and film loops. One of the clearest priorities to emerge from this inventory was the over 100 open-reel audio items that the collection contained. While some had identifying information, such as descriptive labels on boxes or labels with titles, dates, and names, these were not 100% trustworthy, and the material needed to be played and digitized to understand what was contained on them and allow curators to fully explore and engage with this material.
With well over 100 hours of recordings now available to be heard, next came the listening and researching phase of the project. The audio materials include many rare recordings from performances and events assumed to have been undocumented or lost to time. One recording, which was thrilling to hear, is a performance of Jackson McClow's stanzas for Iris Lezak. The recording allows the listener to experience an early reading and performance of stanzas, an opportunity to engage with one manifestation of the work, and which features McClow as a performer as well. It is invaluable for understanding McClow's aims for the work, and how they were activated from the instructions, the poem, the text, to a performance in real time. The recording embodies his ideas, which he outlined both within the accompanying instructions to the work and in subsequent lectures and courses throughout his career. For McClough, chance operations and the simultaneities characteristic of his work were deeply connected to a politics, and specifically for him, to an anarchist politics. The recording reveals the ways that the performers have realized McClough's instructions, that each performer make their own decisions, but that those choices be informed by their fellow performers and responsive to the total sound sequence, that each performer recognize their position within the larger context, and to make choices from their attention to that position. In a lecture at the Naropa Institute in 1975, McClough explained how this requires great care, tact, courtesy, attention, and concentration on the part of each performer. He asserted that virtuosity in these works is demonstrated through the ability to be both inventive and sensitive, producing a kind of model of a way of being in the world. However, the status of this recording is complex. McClough experimented extensively with recorded sound and poetry, layering live performance with recorded sounds and recorded recitations. There is the possibility that this recording is both the documentation of a performance and the basis or a component for another work and performance. This is in fact true of many of the recordings in the collection. Often an artist's recording of a performance, theirs or another artist's, will reappear as the audio for a later film or as the background sound for a new work. Thus, these recordings were never stable, fixed, or final. Beyond being just possible iterations of often explicitly indeterminate works transpiring in real time, they were also often taken up, activated in new ways, through their redeployment as material in subsequent works and performances. Further, the question remains about how to think about these materials and vestiges of performances. How do we care for a work beyond the physical photographs, recordings, and scores related to it? This is in many ways the challenge of approaching all performance, but what I think is essential to be particularly attentive to in the case of Fluxus at the museum is how to use these materials to understand and reconstitute a work while also allowing it to remain fluid and not pinning it, fixing its identity, or rendering it a static object, to retain the openness and indeterminacy essential and inherent to these works. As Carrie Lambert Beatty has argued in relation to performance at the museum, we need to be wary of foreclosing the iterability that is the score's most significant implication.
Running with this idea of the museum taking a fluid and open approach, our second case study is a pairing, Zen for TV by Namjoon Paik and Du Champion and New Descending a Staircase by Shigego Kubota. Both works employ cathode ray tube monitors, yet the role of this technology in each work prompts different considerations. And in this talk, I will use the term CRT for short when referring to cathode ray tube monitors. Zen for TV was among Paik's first altered CRTs, which featured alongside 12 others in his seminal Exposition of Music, Electronic Television, at the Galerie Parnasse in Wuppertal, Germany, in 1963. This has been extensively written about, including by co-chair Hanna Hölling, but in brief, Paik acquired second-hand CRTs for this exhibition. 2 were reportedly damaged in transport, and when switching on one, he found that the image was distorted. The West German TV broadcast was reduced to a thin white line. Paik embraced serendipity. He reorientated the monitor, sat it vertically with the controls positioned at the bottom. This 1963 version was lost to time. The Silverman Collection holds the edition 4 of 12 and 2 CRTs dating from 1975 and 81. These later CRTs were consciously manipulated by the artist and his collaborators to recreate the white line. Due to frequent display, the 1981 monitor exhibits deterioration of the phosphors coated on the inner side of the screen. This is known as burn-in and leaves a ghost image of the vertical line. With a desire to extend the display, curatorial and conservation came together to consider alternate avenues. So, if there is no original Zen for TV, is the museum free to fabricate the next iteration, follow the instructions set out by Paik? Considering the work's history, the CRTs from 75 and 81, and Paik's notes in the Silverman archive, which read, 4 of 12 can be redone in any set, we decided to follow Paik's flux approach. We enacted his directions using a CRT that the museum acquired separately. And here you see Maurice Schechter, who helped us. Here he is adjusting the deflection yoke on the left, and on the right you see that same monitor on display in the galleries. And this was back in 2022. A counterpoint is Shigego Kubota's Duchampiana New Descending a Staircase. This work consists of a standard definition video displayed on 4 CRTs inserted into the rises of a plywood constructed staircase. When acquired in 1981, Kubota gave the museum 4 Sony CRTs and 4 Samsung CRTs. All of these are different to the original set she first used when she showed the work in '76. Of note, though, these Sonys and Samsungs had actually been previously used by Pike for TV Garden and TV Bed. For the 2021 exhibition at MoMA, Shigego Kubota Liquid Reality, the 4 Sony CRTs were used. But I'd like to reference a 2008 artist interview where Glenn Wharton, then MoMA conservator, and Barbara London, then MoMA curator, spoke with Kubota and asked if CRT technology could be changed in this work. She stated, "You have to change because it's not my history of machines. Analog is soon over and now gone, so all digital now." With this, Kubota bestows a very different emphasis on the role of CRT technology in Duchampiana compared to Zen for TV. She opens up the possibility of using different video display technologies when CRT is no longer viable. This pairing explores the continuum that these artworks press the museum to respond to. Yes, the existing stockpiles of CRTs at MoMA can be used in the short term, but the works remain active, and future stewards will need to continue to reconsider these works' capacity for change.
Looking at the kaleidoscopic nature of the disparate elements and ideas these works contain, along with the dispersed nature of this material across institutions, collections, and continents, demands a collaborative approach to the understanding, treatment, and conservation of this material. A great example of this collaboration is exemplified by a recent treatment of Dick Higgins' 1962 film Flaming City, a film that Higgins describes as an anti-Semitic love story about a marvelous part of New York City, and the people who live there. As the city is destroyed, so are they, except that both are indestructible. The film exists within the Silverman Fluxus Collection as 4 reels of 16mm color reversal, 4 reels of 16mm mag track, and 1 reel of open reel quarter-inch audio pertaining to reel 3. All of these elements are typical of low-budget film productions in the mid-20th century, with the 4 reels of color reversal constituting the picture originals, the equivalent of a negative, and the 16mm mag track as the audio originals, which would then be combined into a finished exhibition print for display. While we have all the original elements that Dick used to assemble the film, we lack the final product, that finished exhibition print, which leaves us in the dark as to how the film should look and sound and ultimately be displayed. Much like having the text of stanzas for Iris Lizak without the documentation of performances to reveal its nuances when performed. Was not an insurmountable obstacle, as the inherently multifaceted nature of film production and post-production, along with how these materials are typically spread across various archives, institutions, and collections, has naturally led to a collaborative ethos in film preservation to identify the best possible elements to properly preserve into the future. We began to canvass known collections where other Fluxus films reside and found that the Filmmakers Co-op had a large number of Dick Higgins films, including a print of Flaming City. Working with the co-op, we were able to digitally scan their print material and compare the color, contrast, duration, and audio to the original elements contained within the Silverman collection. As you can see here, the print was much warmer in color, and we wanted to bring our material closer to that print, as clearly there were tweaks and other adjustments made by Higgins when he made these prints back in the 1960s. Once we were happy with how the film looked, we sent off the material for the exhibition and began shoehorning this material into the museum's method of cataloging. At MoMA, the medium-specific departments operate based on different models that are specific to the works they collect. When these works entered DMP, they were cataloged on an object basis, so that each element had a discrete record and weren't directly associated with each other. By bringing together these elements, along with the new scans from an outside source, in this case Filmmakers Co-op, we needed to adjust the cataloging to allow for all of them to interrelate with each other and form the parts of the artwork whole, something that the DMP method of cataloging is not designed for. Looking to adjacent fields, namely libraries, we chose to adopt a model that works much like the functional requirements for bibliographic records, or FRBR, and is a model other curatorial departments, specifically media and performance and film, have adopted. Simply, this operates on a work, expression, manifestation, item ontology to build relationships between different objects and materials. In the case of the Higgins, the work or idea of the film, Flaming City, the expression is the 16mm film in its entirety, the manifestation is the print or complete element in a fixed moment of time, and the item are the reels that constitute this print. This method of arrangement allows the institution to better understand and, more importantly, respect the changing and evolving nature of the work. Looking at the examples of the different technologies, CRTs, analog audio, and motion picture film, each requires knowledge and skill to understand not only how the technology was used at the time, but also how the artist was using it, the context in which it was being deployed. Both inform how one approaches the work from a conservation and curatorial context, and how this can run counter to the underlying structures of where the material resides, in this case a fine arts collecting museum. To better document and care for these works, institutions not only need to embrace the friction this causes with established workflows and methodologies, but to also realize these works in exhibitions more frequently, and to stretch how we understand the work by employing a variety of displays and instantiations of the work. It's through these acts of performance and display, where these works are interpreted by museum staff, collaborators, and the public, that their translation becomes present and allows the institution to reflect, better understand, and ultimately conserve them into the future. Looking again at the artist as guide in this process, perhaps it's ideal to follow McClo's instructions to performers, to act with the same care, tact, courtesy, attention, and concentration he prescribes, and to be both sensitive and inventive in our methodologies. Additionally, the hope is that through sharing of the ideas behind the methodologies deployed, such as through presentations like this, allow for further collaboration, discussion, and debates about these works well into the future.